Hi there, my name is Moray and welcome to Moray's Muse, a non-AI generated history channel. Today we're talking about the greatest emperor, according to many, Marcus Aurelius. I don't think he is, but we're talking about his decision to adopt his son Commodus. Yes, I watched Gladiator 1, I think the first one, for the first time last week, and when I saw what Commodus did to his papa, I switched it off because I knew that was historically inaccurate. So we're going to talk about why Marcus Aurelius actually adopted Commodus. If you've watched one of my prior videos, you'll know that Marcus Aurelius was a wife guy and had many children. You would think, wow, he had lots of candidates to choose from. And another thing is that Marcus Aurelius was adopted himself. In fact, many of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty were adopted. Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, there were a couple of names. Adoption was a huge tradition at the time in the Roman Empire, so why did we get Commodus? Let's discuss it here. So before we get into Commodus' adoption, let's talk about the Nerva-Antonine dynasty and its tradition of adoption. So why did many of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty adopt? Hadrian, a definite homosexual. Antoninus Pius adopted because Hadrian had no heirs. The Nerva-Antonine dynasty was comprised of adopted sons because many of the emperors during that time had no heirs. So blood inheritance was very important in the Roman Empire, as we know from the concept of a new man, a novus homum, being kind of a taboo. The Roman ancestral system was prioritized. So Marcus Aurelius, having many children, had a lot of heirs to choose from. But there was one thing that was happening during this time in the empire that was killing a lot of people. The Antonine Plague. The Antonine Plague decimated Marcus Aurelius' clan, and Commodus was the only male heir who survived. Now, Marcus Aurelius was facing quite a lot of strife during his reign. He is named as the last of the good emperors for a reason. But we also have another event. There was the unexpected revolt of Gaius Avidius Cassidus, and it forced him to cement his succession to his son. Because he cemented his succession to his son, civil war didn't happen when Marcus died. These created unexpected circumstances for someone so bad as Commodus to succeed. Marcus Aurelius had a job on his hands. He had to get his son ready for succession. Commodus was a rightful heir despite being a bad candidate, and adopting somebody when Commodus was around would have created instability. Marcus did have a son. The likes of Trajan and Hadrian didn't. I wanted to chat about how the Nerva-Antonine dynasty is mischaracterized for their adoption practices. Because emperors like Hadrian and Trajan and Antoninus Pius were so great, a lot of people pop culturally just assume that these emperors had their succession chosen for them based on their character. But that's not the case. It was because the likes of Trajan and Hadrian didn't have children, didn't have heirs. Trajan and Hadrian didn't adopt their heirs because the adopted heirs were good men. It just happened that way. And blood-born sons were the default. And in Roman society, the better candidates. But Trajan and Hadrian didn't have blood-born sons. It's just a coincidence that they chose very good men. And from pop culture, we now think that Hadrian and Trajan sought good men to adopt rather than have their own, I don't know, proper kids. Marcus Aurelius finally, out of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty, conceives many sons, and the only one who didn't die was Commodus because of the because of the Antonine Plague.
Okay, and he turns out to be shit.
And he turns out to be shit. And very factually inaccurate. Gladiator was... Another thing that we need to talk about through this video is that Hadrian's adoption policy was really complicated. Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius were quite close. And Hadrian said to Antoninus Pius, "You must adopt Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus ended up passing away, or you're not going to become emperor. So Hadrian's adoption came with lots of caveats, and that created quite a good succession, a very good framework. So let's talk about the Antonine Plague and how Marcus Aurelius's other children were killed. Because Marcus Aurelius had 13 kids. We're going to talk about the child mortality throughout the Antonine Plague. If you watch one of our older videos where I don't have a mic, Marcus Aurelius and Faustina had like 13 kids. I think actually 14 kids, but there was a set of twins. And Marcus Aurelius and Faustina weren't just very good at sex, but they wanted to create like a very big dynasty. Child mortality during Rome was huge anyway, but the Antonine Plague, oof, oh boy. And when Marcus Aurelius started ruling, he was under Hadrian's wishes to rule with Lucius Verus, who ended up passing. Commodus was to rule with his younger brother, Marcus Anninus Verus. Anninus Verus passed age 7 years old. And Commodus was the one who had all the dynastic wishes poured on him. You know, Marcus Aurelius had daughters, but it had to be a male. Obviously, if you know how women were treated during the Roman Empire, women could not rule. Not one of the Elizabeths. Let's talk about the survival stats of Marcus Aurelius' children. Anninus Verus passed away. Lucilla, Fadila, they ended up surviving, but women could not rule. And then he had 7 to 8 children that passed away, but the plague took 6 of them, and they didn't survive into adulthood. Marcus didn't have a choice to choose the most virtuous of his heirs. He was forced to choose Commodus, because Commodus's little brother ended up passing away. Another thing was that Commodus, who had survived a plague, was seen as a strong choice anyway, because he had survived a plague. And disinheriting your son after he survived a plague when many other children have passed, including 6 of your own, that would have been a bad omen. The last deciding factor in Commodus is coronation, if we will. If we're going to use terms for kings. Is the Avidius Cassidus revolt, right? So Marcus Aurelius, really good emperor, but his final days were met with trouble and strife. The Marcomannic Wars were brewing, the Danube frontier was filled with war, and Marcus Aurelius wasn't in well health. 175 CE, we can see the powerful governor of Syria, Avidius Cassidus, declare himself as emperor and created a rumor that Marcus Aurelius had died already, so he could become emperor. Marcus Aurelius wasn't like really lucid at the time, right? But he was like, you know. Marcus Aurelius' wife, Faustina the Younger, had to do something, right? There's a rumor that Faustina the Younger actually encouraged Avidius Cassidus to start this rumor because she was worried about her young son. But as we know from many ancient writers, they make a lot of rumors about women to discredit them. So was this true or not? I do not know. We need to call Doctor Who and get up a time machine.
Time Lord, time machine. Boom.
So Marcus, even though he was barely lucid, did quash this revolt, but he needed to install Commodus as a co-ruler to him straight away. You know, it wasn't after he died. Commodus needed to rule. Commodus needed to rule with Marcus Aurelius right then and then. 175 CE, Marcus Aurelius brings his son to the Danube, and in 177, Commodus is co-ruling with Marcus Aurelius. This was really strategically in military command. He was actually doing a lot of work with the legions. He was on campaign, and Marcus needed to expose his son and give a lot of, I don't know, light to his son. He needed to be the front man of these military campaigns, so Commodus would be easily respected. It was very, very important for Commodus to have to look legitimate in front of the military, because obviously there could be a coup. This is Rome. Marcus Aurelius passes in 180 CE, and the question of succession by that point was closed. Commodus was already ruling by that point. So yeah, Gladiator shows that Marcus Aurelius says, you had to pick an emperor. And Commodus is like, pick me, daddy. All I do is want your love. And Marcus Aurelius is like, no. So yes, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, no legitimate heirs. And Marcus Aurelius did end up having to choose a blood heir wasn't the right choice. Maybe he should have adopted.
Girl, the shade of it all.
Commodus, if Marcus Aurelius had chosen an adopted heir, you know, would have probably been like, I didn't survive a plague for this. Let's go riot. Another thing we need to consider as well, the last thing, is that Marcus Aurelius is like the most famous Stoic in the world, right? Killing your son because they wouldn't have been a good choice, I don't think is very good Stoic philosophy. You know, he couldn't have stripped Commodus of the Augustus title because there could have been a better emperor, someone like Pertinax, for example. You know, Marcus Aurelius, who was known for his like quite leveled leadership, quite frankly, I don't think he did the work for that. I think the fact that Hadrian, Nerva, Trajan, Antoninus Pius, you know, his role models of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty did all the work for him, and Marcus Aurelius had a pretty good run because all the work was done for him. But, you know, he couldn't, with his Stoic philosophy, disinherit his own blood-born son. A lot of Stoicism is about duty, and Commodus would have been the highest candidate for stability in regards to Stoic philosophy. So, as we know the story, Commodus wasn't very good at his job, and the Nerva-Antonine dynasty came to a close in 192 CE, period of turbulence that began after that. Yeah, not so great. Commodus received so much education, so much training, you know, early exposure to roles with administrative duties, and Marcus did provide all the training, but Commodus was just, yeah, he you know, I don't think Hadrian would have appreciated Commodus, to be honest with you.
Who are you?
I'm Pam. Who are you?
I'm the owner of this house.
Oh.
Let's talk about what Cassius Dio says about Commodus. Cassius Dio says that Commodus was not naturally wicked, but he was a coward who possessed great simplicity. But according to Cassius Dio, Marcus knew how simple his son was. Cassius Dio says, Marcus clearly perceived beforehand his son's trajectory, right? Marcus had either become too ill and resigned himself to like the fate of what was going to happen to the Nerva-Antonine dynasty, you know, and apparently that's very Stoic, or desperately hoped that maturity and responsibility would come to Commodus. There's a rumor or a theory that Marcus Aurelius's mentorship at the Danube frontiers wasn't enough for Commodus, who was really simple, and Commodus just craved a comfortable life. There's a lot of discourse online that Marcus Aurelius' choice was really bad and controversial. When Marcus Aurelius, who didn't have the obligations Hadrian had, finally got his turn to give succession to someone, he chose Commodus because he had to, because Rome hadn't had a natural born heir in a minute. You know, the question is, I don't think that the military would have accepted an outsider. After Commodus started ruling, Rome turned from a kingdom of stolen gold to one of iron and rust. And Commodus's succession as Marcus Aurelius's heir was a breaking point for the Roman Empire. Commodus's legacy is a joke. In conclusion, Marcus Aurelius didn't choose Commodus because he thought he was the best man for the job, but he chose Commodus because he had to. Thank you for watching this video. I'm gonna go have some snacks.